Hi everyone, before you dive into the episode, I just wanted to interrupt really quickly. You're gonna dive into this episode and you're gonna hear me call this podcast the Holistic Hustle Podcast. And that is because it used to be the old name of this podcast. And it was an amazing ride. I'm so grateful for the Holistic Hustle Podcast and what it served. But recently I've decided to rebrand the podcast based off the evolution of my own journey, my own story, and where God is calling me to go next. And so now the rebrand, which you may know already, is called Wisdom is Wealth. Didn't want you to be confused, so dive into this episode. They were an amazing episode, amazing guests, amazing insights, and enjoy.
I grew up in a way where I felt isolated in a lot of ways. And what we don't realize that many of the things that we consider what we want are actually part of us. They were put there by other people.
Hi, I'm Justin Buonamo, and this is Holistic Hustle. Holistic Hustle is doing things for the right reasons, working hard for the right reasons. The healthy balance of what work and progression and accomplishment and success should actually look like.
Welcome back to another episode of the Holistic Hustle Podcast with Justin Buonamo. I have my boy Neal Phalora here with me today, who goes by Neal. And Neal is a transformational speaker, a four-time entrepreneur and wealth coach. He is the voice behind the Happy Wealthy Show podcast, featured in books about mindset, speaking, and branding. Neal has been an expert guest on multiple TV spots. He has shared a stage with names like David Meltzer, MMA championship fighter Michael Chandler, Glenn Lundy, and Tim Story. Through decades of coaching others, he has facilitated $75 million in new business. His diverse strengths help his clients become fulfilled and scale financially. His clients' results are better pipelines and unparalleled quality of life. I love that. Neal helps them easily and magnetically attract wealthy relationships. Being a dad to a boy and girl set of twins is one of his top priorities and a place for profound life lessons. And Neal and I, we share a business mentor in Alex Kuhn. We have some common mutual friends. And we connected, I think, for the first time about a year or so ago. And I remember hanging up and I was like, this dude is super cool. And also he's very unique. And then doing some research, some prepping for this podcast, reading your website. And you were like, I was always that dude who thought different. I was always that dude who acted different, who had these different visions. And I was like, man, if we weren't great friends, now we're best friends, because I feel the same way. You know, I think my whole life I've always felt different, thought different, but just never had the permission to act differently. And I think our audience, you know, has a very similar feeling and outlook on life. And that's why I just thought that you were such an incredible guest for this podcast, and many other reasons, which we'll dive into here in a second. But Neal, my man, welcome to the show. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you, brother. I'm honored to do this today. I really legitimately looked at my calendar today. I was like, I'm excited to have this conversation.
Let's go. I love this, dude. And I think you and I, aside from English, we speak many of the same languages. And one of them is just, you know, the wealth consciousness. And I just love your messaging is beautiful. Like when I go through all of your stuff, it just makes so much sense. It's like, if you do the right things as a human being, all of the materialistic and professional things that you want to accomplish flow much easier, right? And I love your core philosophy in business is that people don't buy products and services. People buy you, your story, your energy, and your magic. And with this philosophy in mind, I can see why you've been successful in many things you have done and are currently doing. Like, your story is awesome. You're awesome. And I bet you the majority of people that purchase from you and for you. And so I think a piece of that is you're super relatable, and or at least fairly inspirational to the audience, because you left that six-figure day job because you weren't happy. Simply put, you weren't happy, and you decided to go out and work on your own to chase that larger calling over your life. And so can you explain that journey a little and the motivation behind the leap from corporate to entrepreneurship?
For me, the journey really was about, can I live my dreams? I have 9-year-old boy-girl twins. And at the time, I was like, man, I am telling them that they can be anything they want to be. And I'm saying they can dream, but I am living hypocrisy. I'm living a lie. And kids, they own what they're shown. And the other part of it for me was, I grew up in a way where I felt isolated in a lot of ways. And what we don't realize that many of the things that we consider what we want are actually part of us. They were put there by other people. As I started to do the deep work, I'm like, I am not doing what I want to do. And one of my greatest regrets is that unfilled potential. I want as many experiences as possible in my life because that's what I fundamentally believe. We're a spiritual being in a meat suit, and we're here to have experiences. So the thought of living my life in a place in routine, in the same in and out, Groundhog's Day phenomenon, day in and day out, scared the shit out of me.
Yeah.
And the other portion here is that I started to learn that mindset was from the neck. 80% of mindset is below the neck. And I was like, I have got to heal that. I've got to heal myself to be a better father, to be a better earner, to be a better dreamer.
That's so good. And I like the point about that the majority of the things that are in our life that we think that we want for our life or that we're going after was put there by somebody else, And so I can relate to that so much because, got a master's degree, went and worked in the Hopkins system, and everyone was telling me that like, oh, you've got such a good career, you've got such a good life, right? You've got it made, you're just going to continually just get promoted and make more money. And while that was true, right, something else was true too as well, is that good is the enemy of great, or good is the enemy of attacking the purpose that God has truthfully for your life. And so I was just like, yeah, on paper, it sounds cool, but to me, that's not optimal, right? I was like, yes, making a good amount of money and liking, I would say barely liking, loving is a completely different story, but liking the job that I had, right? And liking the people around me was cool, but I was like, for what? Right? To, work a job that I don't love until I'm 65, right? Live for a short 2-day weekend and get looked at sideways if I take a week vacation and work 50 to 60-hour weeks to never see my family and actually, bond and create the memories that I want to create in life. It just didn't make sense to me. And so that's why I always vibe with your story, because you had the courage to step out, right? And do what you had to do to ultimately chase that feeling of like, there's something greater out there for me. And it's also okay that it's true that like what I'm leaving is good, but it's not for me. And I think people battle with that an absolute ton, where it's like, I know so many people, even people listening to this right now, that are in a good situation, right? And because of that, they're using that as an excuse to not chase the best situation.
Yes. Yes. And one of I love Jim Carrey. He has some great pieces. He's a very wise dude, right? Very different dude, like identify with him. But he says, so many people choose fear guised as practicality. And that's what I think a lot of people are doing. We are choosing fear thinly veiled as what's practical. But there is no position of risk mitigation that will keep you safe. And I will even go on record here, as controversial as it is, to say that if you live a life where you try to mitigate risk at all costs, that's actually a much riskier way to live.
Agreed. Oh my gosh, that is, we're getting into it here. I always say like the middle class, they are the riskiest of them all, disguising themselves as the least risky, right? They're like, I'm going to take zero risk. And what happens is they end up risking or having the largest risk because they end up living a life that's not completely fulfilled. And I think a lot to do with that is mindset, right? And so you have a lot of expertise in wealth attraction and building, which I love. I love the language that you speak. It's one of the main things that you work on with your clients. So what is one thing that is popular, like a popular teaching in the wealth building space that you don't necessarily agree with?
Yes. Well, what I would say is that there's so much of focus on revenue. I'll just tell you, brother, I never wanted to talk about money. I didn't, because everybody in their bruh is talking about get shit done, 10X. It's all the Grant Cardone, alpha male, beat your chest. I was like, there's enough of that out there. But what I started to really experience is that rich is the lowest frequency of its optics. Let me buy something. It's how I look, how I want to feel. Let me show other people. Then people get to revenue, and we call that like arrival, right? And that's where the hustle comes in. But that's only a small part of what wealth is. Wealth, which I started to discover after working with high net worth people and being around them, is so much more. It is connection, it's fulfillment, it's relationships, it's worthiness, and it's revenue. It's an and conversation. And there is no evil in money or things. It's just understanding that it's a and conversation. It needs to be a matrix. It's multiple things that have to come together to create what I consider truly wealthy.
And conversation, not an or conversation, right? And I think I was telling you this, a big motivation behind the mission for this podcast was I heard a quote years ago from Brandon Bouchard, who said, "You're not a true high performer if other important areas of your life, like your health and your relationships, are hindered on your pursuit for professional and materialistic success." Right. And that was me when I was reading it. I was very successful professionally and materialistically, but my health was going to shit. My relationships were going to shit. Right. My marriage was, the back burner like no other. And like even having kids wasn't even close to being in the picture because I couldn't get myself to think about anything else besides my chase for materialistic and professional success. And then at a young age, God put me in this paradoxical corner, right? I love to say, where he gave me everything that materialistically and professionally that I thought was going to give me eternal happiness, was thought was going to give me true wealth. And he was like, here's the amount of money that you wanted to make a month, a year, the house, the cars, the business, whatever. Nothing against those things, right? But I had the wrong idea around them. And he gave them to me at a young age and was just like, all right, now you're just as anxious and depressed as you were before. Are you ready for the real work? Right? You ready for the real work? And that's what you do, is the real work, which is like, it's not saying revenue isn't important, because money is a beautiful tool to help you live your dream life, but it's a very small piece of the puzzle. And I know a lot of people that are rich, right, but are extremely poor, right, when it comes to the most important currencies in the world, right? And so I just love the way that you break that down and teach that, because money is important, but only to a certain extent. But there is other things that are important in addition to that. It is an and life and not an or life. And so I think that's phenomenal, man.
Yeah, thank you. And you said something really there. I hope people play that back. You talked about like, what is this wealth thing? And right. And why do we have to, I don't know if I can cuss on this show or not, but how many damn times do we have to learn this lesson the hard way, that it's not the wealth things. And like, I sat, and we're not best friends or anything, but I had a fortune to sat kneecap to kneecap with Tom Bilyeu, and he says this thing that almost nobody asks him about. He says, the most important thing is how you feel about yourself when you're by yourself. I was like, Tom, what does that actually mean? And I flipped out my phone. I was so glad that I did. But the 30-second version of that, he's like, life is about a game of fulfillment. It's primarily a game of neuroscience. And that unless you live from fulfillment, you will implode. And the reason that most people implode is they don't live that way. He got his $400 million payout and he had all his issues, right? So what I'm saying to people, even another harmonic above that, is that you can scale wealth if you do the work internally. And the way that you're going to scale it is not the hustle mentality, because that's bullshit. Fear, scarcity, struggle, then we get to hustle. But it's then alignment. This action feeds into alignment, and that goes back and forth enough times that bumps you up to intuition. And then you get to authenticity and at that crown chakra as well. But you've got to be able to do the work. And we need to be able to, in that process, contract. If our breathing is a model, if frequency is a model of who we truly are, then we have an up and down cyclical nature. And if you don't learn to come to center or to contract as fiercely as you expand, you'll never get the explosive growth. But people are doing linear hustle. And if we know anything about economics, there's a principle in manufacturing and other places of diminishing returns. But that's what linear hustle does for us. It starts to trail off. But we need to learn to come to center, to contract, to rest as fiercely as we expand. And that's the place where, with this equation of wealth, where you can actually have greater wealth and greater success and greater overall fulfillment, by learning the cyclical nature that we all need to go through: birth and death, sleep and wake.
So good.
In and out respiration.
This is the key. We're going to dive a little bit deeper into that, because this is what he is talking about now is the key to true wealth and true success and true happiness and true presence here on earth. And one thing he said is linear hustle, right? All linear hustle, right, is just us hyper vigilant doing, AKA running and coping from hard conversations with ourselves, other people, and God. And I'm guilty of it like no other. When I'm anxious, I work harder, right? And it doesn't bring me more peace. It just helps me avoid the hard conversations that I truthfully need to have. That if I'm serious about this real wealth building process, if I'm serious about, making the best of my life here on earth, I'm just going to ultimately have to revisit those conversations that I'm avoiding with the hustle in the first place. And so when Neal says like contracting, we have to learn how to do that. One way that I put it, my mentor puts it, is just like sometimes weakness is the answer. Right? Weakness, where it's just like, let me sit down with my wife and just be weak and tell her, hey, I've been falling short in these categories as your husband. And I'm bringing this up because I love you. And I know that this is the key to do better. Right? This past weekend, right? Like, I know I have a big week coming up. Right? And the old hustler in me would have told me, don't lay on the couch, don't nap, don't do anything. I literally slept all day Saturday, woke up Sunday feeling fantastic. Right? And then here Monday, right, feeling awesome because I was able to contract, right, and come back down. And so Neal is the real deal when it comes to what he is talking about right now. And I think a big part of it is because, Neal, you work with your clients to create their vision through combining both neuroscience and spirituality, which I think is brilliant, right? Can you explain how that works and some results your clients have seen from this approach?
So the idea of mindset is very predicated, or it's very bound up in this idea that it's all in our head.
Yeah.
We know by science, we know by religion, hell, we know by wisdom in ancient, especially Asian cultures that are probably 8 to 10,000 years old, that part of the mindset is below the neck, right? It is. And when you think about mindset, it should be top down and bottom up approach. So that's the neuro side of things, is that when people have, you're right, most of entrepreneurship, most of building wealth, most of doing really hard things is about your feelings. It's not about logic. We are a big bag of feelings. But let me differentiate something for the listeners right now, if you're watching this, is that emotions are 90 seconds what happens after hormones release. Feelings are the story about those emotions over time, and those get written in your body. The story starts in your head, the history is kept in your body. Wow. By the time we're 30 years old, 95% of what we do in any situation is a memorized pattern, is not conscious, is unconscious pattern. So ask any athlete, why do they rehearse their body so much? It's because they want the body to know how to do it better than the mind. When you're running 75 yards down the field and you can just turn your head and you know the ball is going to be there, that is not an intellectual process. That is a neurological process, right? So now we're shifting this mindset that's in the body. And I could go way deep and give you some stuff that would blow things up about how science is showing this. But then the spiritual part comes from the fact that we need success is an idea of succession. It's not a goal. It's not a one place. It's a continuous thing. And to move ourselves into greater levels of success, we spiritually need to shift our state of being. Most of everything is a shift of being state. Shifting your state of being is the way in which you get aligned, right? And I have a sort of thing I take my clients to. It's all the way from information to imagination to declaration, visualization. It gets to activation, but it's understanding how in any one moment do I need to shift my state of being. And a lot of that shifting a state of being is not divine masculine, let me just explode. It's a lot of it is let me go in, figure out where I'm at, take a moment. The slow down is the catch up. So those are the two sides I work with.
I love that. The figuring out what your state of being is, right? And so I think you just alluded to it, but that just really just means going in, like not hustling harder, right? Not solving for your anxiety with working harder or, morning routines, which are helpful. It's actually just taking the time to be still, right? To hear from yourself and to hear from God, right? So ultimately understand where you're at and what makes most sense for the next move before we go out and subconsciously make one out of anxiety or stress. Does that sound right when you mean like go within?
Absolutely. In the first part of it, information or information, right, is letting ourselves be informed. Because we are an externally distracted society, we think the answers are out there somewhere. And you're exactly right. You're trying to make the next decision based on, let me just, without all the information, and let me just move faster, do faster, react faster, and it'll somehow come to pass. But it's actually go in. And what I do with my clients often is I say, how did how did the Egyptians know to align the pyramids within 1/10 of a degree of north, south, east, and west? How did Einstein come to all his theories? How did the treatise of how to be a good human and behave as a human being was written before the written word in Sanskrit? It sounds like a Tony Robbins lecture, right? How did all that come about? Who gave them that information? There was no damn phone. There's no damn internet. You're functioning on incomplete information if you don't do the work.
And I love that you end like that, the work, because while it might be necessary for some people's development or like stage that they're at in life or ego development, like the hustle culture is bullshit. Like I used to be the president of it, and did it serve me? I'm thankful for it from some of the things it brought for me. But like when you become, I hate to say it, but like a real man, right? Or you decide to really make meaning out of your life and answer that calling from God, you do the work that Neal is talking about, and then he does with his clients, right? Like for anybody listening here, Neal is the real deal when it comes to creating this transformation, when it comes to unlocking true wealth, right? And making sure that you're wealthy in every important area of your life. And it comes with doing the real work, which is the balance between the neuroscience, right? The factual information, the black and white, and then the gray area, the spirituality, right? All the answers that you need are inside of you. If you just take the time to slow down, to contract, to be weak, to spend the time there, then your next steps will not just be calculated, right? But also aligned and effective. And so, Neal, I beyond appreciate you coming on the show, my man, and sharing this. We're definitely going to have to do a part 2, but I'm going to encourage everybody here listening to take some next steps here, right? Whether that's just simply learning more about Neal, following me on social media, whatever it is, because Neal here or not, right? I can tell you from my own story, from the most successful people that I know, not just materialistic and professionally, holistically, right? People that are good men, good women, great at business, make a lot of money, good sons, good brothers, good daughters, right? Good human beings of society and ultimately healthy internally and externally. They do the work that Neal is talking about, that he has done, and that he helps thousands of people do. And so, Neal, where can people find you and connect, my man?
Yeah, I'll tell you that. But one thing I just like to always add for people who might think, well, this sounds good, but I just need to hustle. I just need to hustle. Here is the keystone moment. Everything that you've ever done that turned out well was based on your intuition. Gary Vee said it. All his magic is intuitiveness. And I have helped somebody buy a $60 million luxury home builder. I have helped people do crazy things. And they almost invariably feel, I always ask them, well, so why'd you decide to go with that? They say, well, felt right. And even most of the time when people say, I think, what they're really saying is, I feel. So if you want greater access to the right decisions and the right path, you got to do this work and understand your intuition. Now, you asked, where can people find me? There is a website where I have sort of this wealth stuff at. It's called thewealthmatrix.com. Yeah. Or you can just find me on pretty much any social media channel at Neal Phalora on Instagram. That's where I hang out mostly. I'm on LinkedIn as well. My first name, my last name, Neal Phalora. I just go by Neo because I prefer that nickname because I do some matrix-like stuff with people. So
I love it, man. And I think just before we end here, to point on that, like the note about hard work, me and Neal aren't saying don't work hard, right? Like you need to actually, when you have this introspective time, it's one thing to meditate and visualize something. It's another thing to actually go out and make it happen so it can be your reality, right? So like we're not against working hard. We just want to do it for the right reasons, right? And working hard, a great compass that I use when I'm going out to hustle or work hard, right? I just ask myself, is this bringing me closer to God or further away? Right? Is this bringing me closer to peace or further away? And that is a beautiful compass for the work that needs to be done. You need to go out and work hard to run a big business, to build financial freedom. It's going to take some work, right? So we're not saying don't go work hard, right? But by any means, and just to use it as a coping mechanism is not the way to go, right? And so again, Neal's work will help you help you decide distinctively what makes most sense when it comes to the work that you need to do and how to go about that. So it's bringing you closer to peace and not further away. And so speaking of closer to peace, I'm definitely there after this lesson and this message, dude. And I know the audience is going to be there too as well. So Neal, thank you so much, my man, for coming on the show. We really appreciate you.
Appreciate you, Justin. Thank you.
Of course, of course. And thank you everyone for listening to another episode of the Holistic Hustle podcast. As always, if you haven't done so already, download, subscribe. And if you know somebody that would benefit from this message, please share it with them. I say episode after episode after episode, I'm designating so much time, money, and energy to creating content that just simply changes the world. And I need your help with disseminating that content to achieve that objective. So we appreciate y'all and we'll see you in the next episode.